Live. Nope, different program. Startup Security Weekly, episode 44. You'll see we look a little different. Matt is joining us this week as a co-host. He was so stellar as a guest. It was, let's just get Paul out of the studio, bring Matt in for a change. So we did that. We're going to talk to the CEO of Banyan. And then we're going to talk about, does the VC fund differentiation actually matter or not? We're going to talk about structured sabbaticals. We're talking about negotiation mistakes. And what's interesting is they don't just hurt your deals. We're going to talk about value today. We're going to show you how that connects. We're going to talk about Squirrel. Some news about Hexadite's interesting. We're going to talk about now a record-breaking year for cybersecurity investment in the VC space. Safe breach prevalent Amazon is in the news and a bunch of other stuff. So stick around for episode 44, Startup Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Startup Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and the Q&A forums. You'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription, visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30.
And we're back. Okay, all right. So we're back, and I know sometimes we jump into it a little too quick, but before we do, I want to make sure I get this out of the way. itpro.tv's courses now include Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator version 9, Kali Linux, CompTIA A+ 901, and Accelerated CompTIA Security Plus. Premium annual membership includes all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. And for a limited time, you get 30% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription using the code SS30. And I'll tell you what, somebody just this week reached out to me. They want to get more active in the security space. They've been watching the program, and I recommended they go the path of CompTIA Security Plus to get started. And I now realize I need to go circle back, let them know about the code, let them get involved in it. But joining me this week through the magic of the internet is Matt Alderman. Matt, welcome to Startup Security Weekly as a co-host. How does it feel?
Thank you. No, it's awesome. When Paul created the other shows, I was joking with him a couple of weeks ago. You never gave me credit, so now I get to co-host.
That's right. Now it's your chance. Well, look, I hope everybody got a chance to check out our last episode where you were the guest. It was for me, it was trippy because you and I ask a lot of the same questions and we look at it from a different direction. So I'm kind of like, I'm validated and I'm validated and I'm validated. And that'll be great. But so it's exciting to have you here and get your take on a lot of the stuff. I know you've covered the space for a long time. Do you want to introduce Tarun, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Well, obviously, I mentioned Banyan Ops a couple of weeks ago when I was on the show and we were looking for a guest interview. So I made the suggestion, but I think it's probably better coming from you to make the quick intro. I can start the questions, though.
You know what? It's a deal. I'm going to call you on it. All right. So Tarun, he's the co-founder, CEO of Banyan. So naturally, in my head, there's a lot of questions there. Banyan, we're going to ask about this. We're going to get into it, and we're definitely going to ask about the problem they solve. They're in the area of container and microservices, but from a security perspective. And so we're going to take a look at things like product strategy and business execution and everything else. And we're in the way of what looks like an exciting weekend for Tarun. So let's go ahead and hammer into it. Welcome to Startup Security Weekly. I'm glad you joined us, and I hope you're ready for some good questions.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
Well, and now you're a cool guest.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll at least kick it off this way. I know Paul's been playing a lot with containers recently, and it looks like he's had moments of elation and moments of wanting to sit in the corner and cry and rock himself to sleep. And then we get into things like microservices. So when you start and you're even looking at securing it, before you even jump into the problem you have, what does somebody listening to this need to know? How big is this as a space? Because I think things like container and microservices, I've heard the words. If somebody asked me to turn around and explain it today, I'd probably struggle with it. So as the CEO of a company focusing on it, how do you help people get their heads wrapped around what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually got started 2 years ago in this space. So back then, it was even less well known. It was just a small niche technology that a few people were kind of tinkering with, and it was getting kind of mainstream. But now when you fast forward in 2017, it's kind of part of the IT professional's vocabulary. So many times, they at least have heard about it. They know a little bit about containers, and the education is more around, hey, these are the use cases containers are good for. These are some kind of the pitfalls that you have. But at this point, I would say the best way to kind of get familiar with a containerization system is to just download it and start playing with it. It's become that easy. If you use Docker, it's just a double click, and it's installed on your PC, and you can start playing with it right away. So it's actually become very consumable over the last 2 years.
Now, Tarun, your team has an interesting background because I think they worked at VMware before in the virtualization space,
Right.
and this is like virtualization of virtualization. So, I'm curious how some of the lessons learned from the virtualization world apply into the container world, and kind of what's changed in the approach between a virtual image and now a container, which I kind of think is a virtualized image.
Yeah, double nested virtualization almost, if you look at how things are done. And that's a great analogy because a lot of the challenges that enterprises faced going from physical hardware to the virtual world are kind of now being replayed as companies go from maybe just pure virtualized environments to containerized environments. There is a little bit of a difference here. I think, when people moved from physical hardware to virtualized hardware, it was primarily IT cost efficiency driving it. And now when you look at containers, it's really more about the applications. It's more about the developers. So it's almost a different team that's driving the adoption of this technology. And the ramifications are different as well, although there are analogies.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into kind of one of the root questions we always want to understand, which is what's the problem? What's the market problem with containers? Right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about Docker and containerization and microservices. And so we hear the words, but what are some of those problems that people have to now try to solve when they try to adopt these types of technologies?
Yeah. And just before I go there, the problems are not exactly what happened when people went to VMware. The problems are different now. And the problem fundamentally is one of the application. So, traditionally, the way people built applications was a big jar file or a big RPM that you deployed on a server, and it spoke to maybe an Oracle database. That's how most applications had been written for a very long time. But fast forward now, when folks adopt containers, these containers are actually deployed in a public cloud like Azure. The containers end up talking to a streaming or a big data platform like Kafka. So suddenly, what you had was a fairly simple application has now been broken up into a bunch of different small pieces that are all interacting with each other. It's great for the development velocity. You're very agile, new features all the time. But kind of traditional security is not meant to secure these kinds of environments. Your firewalls or your virtual appliances were meant to be put on the perimeter, not inside, where your containers are all talking to each other. So
Right.
if you look at a couple of the recent breaches, Yahoo, for example, a few years ago lost 1 billion records. Just a few months ago, Tesco Bank exposed a bunch of customer data and is now facing like a $2 billion fine, billion with a B. And a lot of this is because they have no way to secure a distributed application. And that is the basic problem I think containers have created.
So there's we've seen this rise in application security kind of companies and products coming out there, right? So you have, Veracode and the Veracode's recent acquisition on the static analysis side. You have Black Duck and Sonatype doing kind of open source static analysis of the libraries. Now you have the runtime application self-protection vendors. So there's a lot of people coming at the application from a lot of different directions, I think, right now, because everybody kind of sees the new attack surfaces of the app. How do those technologies either help or not help in the container world, right? Because I think some of the challenges are these technologies that we've seen over, maybe the last 5 to 10 years really don't understand how containers. And so I'm curious how either these technologies help or don't help as we move into this new container architecture.
I think on the code development side, the technologies you mentioned, all the static analysis, code analysis, package analysis, moving to containers doesn't really change it that much. Maybe you have to run it more often because you have a lot more code. But the fundamental idea that your code gets written, gets tested, gets compiled, that hasn't really changed as companies move to containers. Would you agree with that, Matt? I mean, maybe you need more of it.
No. Yeah, and maybe the way you do it is slightly different because now you have to do static analysis at the container versus the fully assembled application. But right. I think theoretically that's right.
And I think what happens is with containers, they move so quickly, you deploy them so often that you want to do them as the code is being written. You don't want to wait till it goes into production and kind of test it out there. You want to be more in the DevOps pipeline, as it were. So that is the main change. But I don't think anything from the core technology has changed. On the runtime side, however, I think that's where the big change has to happen. If you look at RASP is actually a very good idea. The problem with RASP is that you have to go change your application. You have to adopt an SDK or adopt some kind of module. That becomes challenging, as a security professional to convince your developer to go put something new in there. Because the first thing a developer will do when the application has a bug is turn off the security module. Like that's just, I do that. I don't understand it. It's probably the fault, and I'm just going to turn it off. So RASP was a good approach for maybe kind of the Java monolithic applications. But now when you have 5, 10 of them running around in different containers, there's just too much management overhead with a RASP-like solution. But when it comes to these containerized infrastructures, from the security perspective, I think securing the runtime is kind of the exciting new area. It's kind of the area where we've been working on for the last few years. We think there's a lot of challenge there and a lot of innovation there as well.
I know. This is a space that a lot of the VCs are actually trying to get their heads wrapped around. So if there's confusion in that space, when you go into the enterprise, how do you identify then who's trying to tackle this challenge today? Like, are you finding that it's really different across all the industries and companies? And and is there a certain amount of education that you kind of have to bring people through before they go, oh, I have that? Or are the people who are in the weeds dealing with this really excited to see you come along because it's a breath of fresh air?
I wish everybody fell in that last bucket. That's my goal.
Of course.
But one of the most interesting things about the security market that I have found is that there's a lot of noise. There are a lot of people promising the world. And so when you reach a security professional saying, I have a solution for you, most times they're actually fairly skeptical. They're like, nah, yeah. I've heard pretty much everything that's out there. And you're just another guy, selling ice to an Eskimo. But to answer your question, a lot of the cool part of being in the container space is that it is still fairly new. There are not too many experts, especially security experts out there. So a lot of our conversations with application security or network security professionals at an enterprise are educational. Hey, your development team is currently POCing, Docker. In 6 months, when it goes into production, these are the kinds of problems other enterprise organizations have faced. And this is how we think you should solve it. And these kinds of educational sessions, a lot of security professionals are open to having. So that's how we are getting into a lot of the enterprises we work with. And then in terms of being the breath of fresh air, once a security professional has had to deal with this distributed infrastructure and they see the solution that we have to offer, I think they genuinely are like, oh, that's cool. That's great. It takes a lot of burden off my shoulders.
Yeah, so you're still doing a lot of, I think, early education, a little bit in the space because containers are so new. Yeah. But then, kind of walk me through that value proposition or those benefits for the customer, right? Because at the end of the day, that's how they're going to buy. They're going to see value in what you're doing. I'd like to understand kind of what are some of those value props and benefits that Banyan can provide to the customer.
Absolutely. So the problem we described earlier was that these are distributed applications. And our solution, we call it a security virtualization layer. So unlike appliances, unlike hardware, we're a really lightweight layer that just integrates security functionality into the application itself. So, we're independent of any code that you write. We're independent of the network. We're a transparent, lightweight layer that just allows you to build security right into the application. So one of the biggest value propositions to a security team is not even technical. It's organizational. We enable a security professional to be part of the development process. If you buy into the fact that security needs to be kind of built into the substrate of an application, the security guy isn't just brought in at the end saying, hey, can you check off some checkboxes, put a firewall in front of the application, and let me go live? And invariably, the security professional is like, no, you're not secure. You have all these problems. So, it becomes a very a discussion full of friction. But if organizationally you buy in that, hey, security should just be part of the application. And when I deploy a new service, I should write some rules for how that service should run. And that's how the thing should work. Right there, it's kind of a small organizational shift, but it brings the security professional right into the application development process. So I think that's a big value proposition for a lot of companies that are going through a DevOps transformation or trying to be more agile in their development processes. And then from the technical side, once you deploy our product, the security guy gets immediate visibility. And just not visibility into who's talking to who. Like the cool thing about our technology is we give you API level visibility. So you know exactly what data is being traversed through your network. And at the end of the day, the bad guys are after your data. So if you want to secure these APIs, if you want to secure the data, you need to have visibility into it. And so visibility is a big value proposition that Banyan provides. And then the last value proposition is around controlling that. Once you figure out how your data is flowing around these distributed applications, our lightweight layer gives you a quick way to enforce least privilege access control. So no unauthorized folks can get access to your data.
Great.
Are you often I'm sorry, Matt. Are you often positioning that to the security folks? Because I dig that. I'm curious how the development team hears that. Like, did they hear that the same way, or do they hear, oh, not more security stuff again? I can't stop. Make it go away.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely, I would agree with you, Michael, that a lot of development teams hear the fact that they need to roll security out, and they're like, just please. So oftentimes the value proposition is that, guys, we will not slow you down. This is a security layer that is meant to be run, with your process. It's not like the other security tools you've dealt with in the past. But on the other hand, kind of the more modern organizations, they actually recognize the value of security. Okay. And they are happy that either they were going to do it themselves. So either they were going to hire a developer and make the developer write code. And some of the modern development teams are happy that they can have a product that's focused on security instead of building it all themselves. So there's a great value proposition to the dev team as well.
But I would imagine the primary buyer today is SecOps, not DevOps in your space, right?
Agreed. Okay. Agreed. It's still SecOps, but you're taking a burden off the DevOps guy's shoulder. So the DevOps guy doesn't need to roll out his own cryptography. The DevOps guy doesn't need to figure out how to manage all these different communications, and allows them to actually go build a product, improve the stability and the performance of their system.
Well, and do you find too, Mike, when we look at deals, I mean, so you're selling the SecOps and you need them to champion it. DevOps, though, could kill it if they don't buy in, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So by having a value prop for them, I mean, I like that, by the way. Like if I look at anything and they say, we're going to help you extend security out, and then the team goes, oh, and they go, no, we're not going to slow you down, and you get what you need out of it, and they'll get what they need, and they stay out of your hair. Well, some of us don't have any, but it makes it easier for everybody. So I like that.
All of us on this podcast don't have any.
So
I have got a little bit. We're right at the top yet. I'm holding on to it as long as I can.
That's right. Well, so I obviously like talking about things then to like impact and differentiation, but I'm kind of curious now that you're in that startup and you're learning how to go out and explain fairly new complex technology to people. What are some things about being the CEO of a startup that have surprised you? I mean, you had tremendous experience coming into this. Is there anything that stands out as didn't see that coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, Actually, the one thing that surprised me, and I don't know if you guys know, but about 40 years ago, there was a company named Banyan Vines. Yep. It was an old school company. It was a networking company. Yep. And we're in the Docker ecosystem. It's all like 20-year-olds in this ecosystem. It's like young companies. So typically, when we got started, when it was a small niche area, no one really questioned us. But as it's become more mainstream, I've genuinely been surprised by the number of people who confuse us with Banyan Vines, being like, "Oh my God, that company is still around."
Well, like, I'll tell you what. When Matt first suggested it, that's the first thing that went through my head. I'm like, I didn't think they were still here, so I had to go look it up. And even when I was like profiling, I had to like remember to write it the right way and check it. So I guess I've now dated myself. But yes, that did cross my mind.
But maybe it's a sign that this technology has become more mainstream. That it's not just the young, young developers are using it.
So
serious enterprises.
Is that a tip? Is that a tip then? Like reuse some old technology name for recognition as a startup, and then differentiate yourself off the old company.
Yeah, and the other thing that genuinely surprised us, when we got started, we published a research report. It was a very innocuous research report. We were just looking at, hey, people are thinking about containers. What are the kind of vulnerabilities that are sitting around in containers? It was a really technical article. My wife looked at it. She's like, "This is the most boring article I have ever read." And we just put it on our blog, and it just blew up. It was on the front page of the Register. It was picked up by Hacker News. It was picked up by like all these different security publications, and it just genuinely surprised me the amount of interest, the amount of deep technical interest in this field. It surprised us, but it also reaffirmed that okay, there is some fire here. We should go out and build a business here. So I've also been pleasantly surprised by the amount of interest in what used to be a fairly niche area. And then I have one politically incorrect thing. I've also been surprised by the just ludicrous amount of crap, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, you can say that.
My previous job, I used to sell to IT. We used to sell to marketing, and we used to have these big technical discussions, and it was great. And in these security sales, oftentimes it has nothing to do with what we've built. It's I have no other word for it than to say crap. It's that's genuinely been eye-opening.
Do you find
I guess when you mean crap, are you talking about the FUD around the different tools and how they solve the problem? Is that kind of the stuff you're fighting against?
Exactly. Typically when you sell to an engineering organization, engineering either works or it doesn't work. It's fairly straightforward. But it's much harder when you're selling security when they're like, this threat is possible and therefore we are better. And the FUD. FUD is a better word than crap. Thanks,
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like a lot of the folks they read books and they read about some persuasion technique and they're like, oh, I'm going to use that. But what I found kind of fascinating is on this side of the startup too, is that so you're responsible for learning how to sell, and you've got to go through that process and break it down and figure out your value proposition and how to deliver it. And now you've got to be getting pitched crap all the time where you're like, you didn't even try. What are you doing? I don't have time for you. And I'm just kind of curious, like how Well, whatever. I guess that's my own comment on it. I've always find it's kind of fascinating when you cross over and realize you can have the best solution in the world, but you've got to be able to communicate it better. All right. So you're in the world of Docker, microservices. You're looking at things like that. When you look out at the broader spectrum, what gets you excited about the industry? What are some other things, maybe even complementary things, where you like the innovation that's coming out of it, and you think maybe we as a show or us as an industry should pay more attention to it?
Yeah, one thing we use extensively is cryptography. We use cryptography in our solution in a lot of things. And I was listening to a few of your podcasts, and I'm not sure that's an area you've dived into kind of in detail, but really feel like cryptography is a very interesting way to do security now. Recognizing that you really can't trust your networks, you can't trust your data itself sometimes, you don't want to trust your developers. And then if you have a nifty way to encrypt and decrypt traffic and data. So there are companies like NewCipher, for example, that do some very interesting open source projects called proxy re-encryption that allows the publisher of data to encrypt it and the consumer of data to decrypt it, but without kind of transparently, without sharing any keys, doing it in a very lightweight manner. That is to me, it's an adjacent area, but a very interesting area, kind of leveraging cryptography to ensure security.
I like it. Yeah, that's great.
Kind of on the lines of the homomorphic encryption kind of
exactly. Yes.
buzz that's out there, right? If all the data were encrypted, we don't need anything else, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. But making it usable. The problem with encryption is invariably, you encrypt it, the developer will decrypt it and save it in the database, decrypted. And then you're like, why did I spend all this time encrypting the damn thing if you're going to save it decrypted? So usability becomes very hard.
I've loved encryption for years, and I've often bristled when there's like a breach or something. This is going back 10 years. As we go, oh, the answer is encryption, and I say, no. The question then is, how did you select the keys? How did you select your algorithms? How did you manage it? How did you use it? How did you protect the memory on it? And as you pointed out, if all I did was decrypt it and store it, okay, thanks. But no, you're right. That's a good point.
Yeah, and key management's still the issue. I mean, we talked 2 weeks ago when I was on the show about OneLog and in the breach, and part of it was keys. It was keys into AWS that were leveraged to make that breach happen, right? So key management is the important part of cryptography as well, as making sure that the management and the security of the keys are there.
And on the topic of login, I think one of the most painful aspects of everything today is the password. It's password, two-factor authentication. Pretty much that's how everyone breaks in. They find a way to work around your password or your authentication. So we have friends who run a company called Unify ID. We were part of the same incubator at Stanford, and we have similar thesis around identity, except they're focused on the end user. So they do it all with machine learning. They kind of figure out, hey, if it's Matt, how does Matt walk? How does Matt type? And so by the time it comes, when you have to log into something, there's no password. It's just built a little data model of all your behavior, and it just gives you access. So it's kind of like James Bond, where they scan your retina and they let you in. This is like the modern version of.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. So based on your take on that so far, and I don't want to go too deep, but if we still go back to we're either supposing that the classic something something you have, something you are doesn't work, or that's a something you are, but we're no longer limiting it to a biometric feature we can measure. We're limiting it to more that we can measure and build a much more accurate composite that's therefore harder to fake.
I think it's something you do, actually, right?
Yeah. So, because I know for a while people tried like some place you are, and I was like, yeah, geolocation always made me nervous, but this is kind of interesting.
But this is where you bring kind of
suggestions.
Yeah, Unify ID. There's a couple more that are out there that I was back east last week, and there's another one in this space. But they're really trying to understand from the mobile device on this particular case how you use your mobile device, like how do you hold it, how do you this, that, and the other thing, and that's used to get you actually into the device, which I thought was pretty interesting.
And bringing it a full circle back to our conversation, when we work with containers, for example, we fingerprint the container in the pipeline. We're looking at what the container is doing when it's running, and we also assign an identity to it. So it's similar. You can almost take some of those concepts and apply it to how we think about securing container and microservice environments.
I like that. All right. So last piece then. Somebody else today, sitting in an enterprise, looking at, I've got an idea, I want to go be a startup, I should go do it. What's your advice to them? And I heard you say that you were part of an accelerator. So somebody who's interested, what would you tell them to do? What advice would you give somebody at the early stages of this journey?
I'm a big fan of the accelerator model. Not all of them. Some of them are kind of pay to play, and I don't like those. But there are several accelerators in Denver. I think Matt knows SecureSet. So this is a security focused, Denver focused accelerator, and those are the best kinds where they're local. You can work with them, you can talk to them, they give you some space, you work with them for a couple of months. I think that's a great way to go see if your idea actually has legs. So that I would definitely think about the accelerator route. The other one I found is, if a lot of security companies want investors, security takes time to build, so you need deep-pocketed investors who are willing to back you for a few years to see if your idea has legs. And accelerators give you access to a lot of investors. And so that's another good vehicle there. And the one thing I would say is don't build a WAF. And there are enough WAF companies in the world. if I could give, just like that's one area I would recommend. Don't go there.
That feels like the mic drop moment. That's awesome. Matt, any other questions?
No, I think Tarun, it was great to have you on the show. So this was a great interview segment.
That was exciting. I took notes. I got ideas. It's fantastic. So
I did too.
Thank you so much for joining us at Startup Security Weekly. We're going to take a quick break, come back, and Matt and I are going to talk about articles and the notes of interest of the week.